is going on, everyone? Welcome back to this week's installment on The Lake Show, and I appreciate you all making me a part of your day again. And last week, I did a little bit of a preview on the NBA Finals. I knew that the Mavericks were going to win. I knew that the Celtics were going to be in it. And I didn't necessarily think the Mavericks were going to absolutely bludgeon the Timberwolves to death, basically, in Game 5 last week. I didn't see that coming. I did not see Dallas being able to really put it to the Timberwolves in that manner, really beating them by almost 30. That was a shock, honestly. That was honestly a big-time shock, in my opinion. But I knew that the Mavericks, I knew that Luka and Kyrie, I knew that they were going to be too much for Cat and Anthony Edwards. I knew that how that series was going to end. And the Mavericks, I think, well, we're going to talk about that today. But again, I really appreciate you all making me a part of your day. It's been a fun time. I really had a blast for these past couple of weeks making this content. Last week, a little bit of a dip in the viewership, but that's on my part because of some things I didn't do for YouTube in general. But I really appreciate the constant and, loving support for the channel. I really do. And, I can't be more grateful for all of you guys. We're almost at 150 subscribers, so keep those subscriptions coming in. You're really helping out the channel, and we're going to have some fun today. Obviously, Bucked Up Ambassador, if you need any pre-workouts or any lifting gear whatsoever, head to buckedup.com, use promo code SHOW32, get yourself 20% off on your next order. So, a little bit of a shorter episode today. Bear with me, guys, just because I mentioned last week I started a new job, and, it's kind of hectic right now. I'm in training for it, and my schedule is all messed up right now. My schedule, my sleep schedule, my podcasting schedule, my work, my lifting. I take all of that, very seriously. And, obviously right now I'm just working on getting myself back to normal, getting myself, on a more consistent schedule. So the next couple weeks, I really appreciate you guys being patient with me. Just bear with me. I'm just working out the couple kinks and figuring out what time of days of the week, I can set aside time for certain aspects that, I'm just working on in my life. So I really appreciate you all being patient with me, and I'm very grateful for all the support and the love for the channel, and we're going to get the ball rolling today. So we're obviously going to start with the biggest topic, and that's the Dallas Mavericks and the Boston Celtics making the NBA Finals. And the NBA Finals begins this Thursday on June 6th, and I think it's going to be a great series, but I don't think it's going to go all 7 games. I personally believe that it's going to go 6 games. I mentioned this before in last week's episode. I talked about the recent woes when it comes to the Boston Celtics over the past, give or take, 8 to 10 years of their entire franchise's history. Really, I talked about their history since the 2008 championship team with Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, Rajon Rondo, Kendrick Perkins, and a loaded bench when they beat the Lakers back in 2008. But, that seems like a lifetime ago. With all the opportunities that Boston has had recently, I talked about it. They missed the playoffs once. They've been to the conference championship game in the East 6 out of the last 8 years, including this year. And it's been nothing but failures for them. It has been nothing short of just choke after choke in the playoffs for Boston. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I believe this is their 7th or 6th year together in Boston. Is this finally the year they put it together? I don't know. Because Boston did make the finals with this core, minus a couple other additions, but they did go up against the Golden State Warriors. And at the time, I thought the Golden State Warriors had one of the easiest paths to the NBA Finals. And I can't remember exactly who in the West was injured at that time, but I have the whole playoff bracket right here in front of me, and I'm going to put it up on the screen for you guys. So I'm going to talk about the roads that the Mavericks took and the Boston Celtics took to get to the NBA Finals. So in the first round in the Eastern Conference, obviously Boston beat the Miami Heat 4-1 in the series. And honestly, I knew Boston was going to wipe the floor with Miami, especially since Jimmy Butler was not playing. If Jimmy Butler was completely healthy, I think the Miami Heat would have beat them. I believe Miami was an 8th seed last year when they played the Nuggets in the finals. So I I think Jimmy Butler is the most underappreciated player in the NBA. Honestly, he is just so spectacular. I really wish that him and Derrick Rose won a championship in Chicago, but that wasn't meant to be. But either way, so Boston wiped the floor with Miami 4-1 in the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. And that's no shock to me, honestly, just because of that Jimmy Butler injury. And, who else does Miami really have to lean on? Tyler Hero? He reminds me of an Austin Reeves. He's, hot and cold and very inconsistent when it comes to playing on the court. So, personally, I knew Boston was going to make, easy works of the Miami Heat. I'm not shocked at the way that ended whatsoever. So, now on to the conference semifinals. The Celtics go up against the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they wipe the floor with Cleveland. Now, Cleveland did steal one. Boston won the series 4-1. But Donovan Mitchell for Cleveland was hobbled that entire series. Donovan Mitchell wasn't completely healthy. So, obviously, it would make sense that Boston would make quick works of Cleveland. That doesn't shock me whatsoever. And then you move to the conference finals. The Celtics go up against the 6th-seeded Pacers. Well, the 6th-seeded Pacers lost Halliburton. I believe it was early in game 1 or 2 that they lost Halliburton. And that changed the trajectory for the Pacers completely. And, that's the reason Boston was able to sweep them 4-0. But if Halliburton was healthy, I think it would have won 7 games. The Pacers should have won game 1. And that would have changed the entire trajectory of the entire series. If it wasn't for Jaylen Brown making that last-second three-pointer to tie the game and send it into overtime, I think the Pacers legitimately had a chance early on in this series to actually beat the first-seeded Celtics. I really do. So, obviously, I mentioned the Pacers were the 6th seed. And, obviously, Miami, first two series against Miami and Cleveland, they made quick works of them. They only lost 2 games in those entire series. And then, obviously, they sweep the Pacers. But look at the path that the Pacers took. They went up against the 3rd-seeded Bucks. They beat them 4-2 in the first round. Well, Giannis Antetokounmpo was not healthy, and Damian Lillard was not healthy, really. For all intents and purposes, if the Bucks were completely healthy, I would have said Milwaukee would have easily beat the Pacers in 5 or 6 games. Now, the series went 6. I know that the Bucks got 2 games on the Pacers, but when Giannis is hurt and Damian Lillard are hurt, when your 2 best players are hurt, and all you have to rely on is Chris Middleton, who's a fine 3rd, he's a fine number 3 player or number 2, but that's just not enough to go up against a grit and grind like Pacers team. They play physical. That's what the Pacers do. So obviously, you transition to the next round. The Pacers end up playing the New York Knicks. Well, the New York Knicks, Jalen Brunson was hurt, was hobbled pretty much towards the back end of that series. I know it went 7 games, but Jalen Brunson was not 100% whatsoever. Excuse me. But the way you look at the Knicks, the way they got to the second round, they went up against the 76ers, who were hobbled. Joel Embiid was basically playing on one leg that entire series. So, in my opinion, it made sense. I would have picked the 76ers. If they were fully healthy, I would have picked them to beat the Knicks. I think the Knicks are going to make deep playoff runs over the next couple of years. I really do. And I think they definitely have the potential to win an NBA championship. I know that seems far-fetched, but the way that team is constructed, Jalen Brunson, DiVincenzo, all they have to do is add a 3rd star, not necessarily one who's ball dominant, because Jalen Brunson has to have the ball in his hands to at least be able to distribute to other players. But if they got themselves like a Kevin Durant or something like that, I think the Knicks would springboard into the conference finals and eventually NBA championship. But like I said, Joel Embiid was hurt and hobbled that entire series, so the 76ers weren't completely healthy, so that propelled the Knicks to the next round. And this all circles back to Boston making the finals because they had the easiest path to the NBA finals I've ever seen. And I talked about that last week, but Jimmy Butler got hurt. Donovan Mitchell got hurt. Giannis and Damian Lillard both got hurt. Halliburton got hurt for the Pacers. Jalen Brunson was hobbled. And Joel Embiid was hurt in the East. All those Eastern Conference players that, would have made a huge impact. And these are not just role players. These are the best, the elite of the entire NBA. Those are the top stars, the top dogs. And Boston just wiped the floor with anybody that came their way because they weren't fully healthy. So this worries me for Boston. I know they were the first seed. I know they had a great regular season, and I know they made quick works of every team they played in the playoffs. But I really just don't understand how Boston just has not been tested. Boston, this is their toughest test, is going up against the Mavericks. So let's transition to the Mavericks in the West. So the Mavericks, they play the Clippers in the first round. They win that series in 6 games, 4-2. But Kawhi Leonard barely plays. Kawhi Leonard, now personally, I like Kawhi Leonard. He was one of my favorite players. A couple of years ago, I used to love watching him play all the time. But Kawhi Leonard is never available. He's just never available to play for the Clippers in the playoffs. It's kind of funny that he shows up in the regular season just enough to make sure he qualifies for his game checks and everything for his contract. But, he's legitimate. He was legitimately injured this year. You don't want to, discredit any injury that happens to any player. But at the same time, Kawhi Leonard just isn't available ever for Ty Lue and the Clippers. The Clippers have been notorious for choking, more so than Boston. Boston at least has, I think, 16 championships under their belt. Clippers don't have one. They've been the Lakers' younger brother for forever. When the Clippers got Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, that was supposed to be the big mesh that was finally going to propel the Clippers ahead of the Lakers with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. But, obviously, during COVID and in the bubble, not normal circumstances for a playoff match, but the Lakers have a championship under their belt with LeBron and Anthony Davis. And now the Clippers moving into a new arena next year, they have nothing to show for it with this core. I feel bad for Ty Lue because, he's a fine coach, but his players are just never available. Paul George, he does his best, but there's only so much that one player can do. It's a team sport. All team sports. Not one person, other than quarterback in the NFL, can completely derail your entire team. You can in NFL, you can afford to lose a receiver. You can afford to lose a running back. It's just the next man up at that point. Quarterback is different. Your main guy goes down at quarterback, you're done. You're basically done for the entire year. We know how your season's going to turn out. But in the NBA, if you don't have one star on the court, that just derails your entire team. And that happens when Kawhi Leonard does not play. Now, again, he was injured this year, legitimately injured. But, he's just never available. I don't know if you can run it back if you're the Clippers. So, the Mavericks, at the 5th seed, made quick works of the Clippers in 6 games. So now the Mavericks, in the second round in the conference semifinals, they go up against the Young Thunder with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And they made decent works of them too, 4-2 in the series. And then the biggest test, I honestly didn't see the Mavericks beating the Timberwolves, but, as the series progressed, I knew that the Mavericks were overmatched for the Timberwolves. They made quick works of them in 5 games. Like I said, I knew if the Timberwolves got one game, they had a chance to make it a series. I really thought that the Mavericks and Timberwolves would have went 7 games. I really did. But wasn't to be. Luka and Kyrie made Anthony Edwards look like a chump. Now, Anthony Edwards got his for an okay amount of games, but he shot very poorly early on in this series. He shot absolutely poorly. But the Mavericks made quick works of them. Mavericks are built different. They went through a lot more challenging teams in the West than Boston did in the East. I mentioned earlier that basically every single superstar in the East was hurt. Well, yeah, Kawhi Leonard was hurt, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the Thunder were basically completely healthy. the Timberwolves were completely healthy. Everybody thought the Timberwolves were going to the finals, especially after dethroning the Nuggets in 7 games. Excuse me, guys. Like I said, it always happens when I'm trying to record. Excuse me. But I personally thought the Timberwolves would go to the finals, especially after dethroning the Nuggets in 7 games. Now, I knew that was going to be a good series either way, but I was pleasantly surprised that the Timberwolves were able to knock off the defending champions. But the Mavericks made quick works of the Timberwolves. So now we arrive to the NBA Finals. We got the 5th seeded Dallas Mavericks led by Jason Kidd, who ironically was the point guard of the Mavericks' last championship team back in 2011 with Dirk Nowitzki and Jason Terry and all them guys. That was a fantastic team to watch. But it's just funny now that Jason Kidd is the head coach of the Mavericks. 13 years later, the last time the Mavericks won a championship, Jason Kidd was their point guard, and now he is their head coach, leading them back to the finals. So you got the 5th seeded Mavericks with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving against the 1st seeded Celtics with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. I personally think that the Mavericks are going to be too much for Boston. I'm not saying it's going to be a sweep. I'm not saying it's not going to be a good series. I don't think Boston has been tested enough. Boston has had it easy all the way through to the conference finals and into the finals. Boston had the easiest path I've ever seen to an NBA finals in my life. Boston, I don't think they have enough grit. I don't think they're going to live up to the challenge. I really don't think that the Boston Celtics can handle what the Mavericks are going to put at them. Kyrie Irving is playing out of his mind basketball right now. So happy for Kyrie Irving. He's first or second best point guard in the league. You can argue that. I mean, I still think Steph Curry is the greatest three-point shooter of all time, but Kyrie Irving, he's not far off when it comes to talent and when it comes to current play in these past couple years. For all intents and purposes, Kyrie Irving, when he was at the Celtics and the Nets, people were contemplating whether he should just retire because at that time, he was a headache. He really was a headache on and off the court and gave the Nets a lot, especially head coach Steve Nash at the time, gave him a lot of headaches, but he's redeemed his career with the Mavericks and playing with Luka Doncic. And Luka probably going to end up being the best European player to ever come into the NBA. I think Luka is probably going to, I think eventually later down the line, he'll challenge LeBron for the most points in NBA history if Luka plays that long. But I definitely think Luka, he'll end up, when it's all said and done, I think he'll have, maybe a couple championships, maybe, but that might be pushing it because the Mavericks haven't been notorious for making long, deep playoff runs. But when it comes to Luka Doncic himself, NBA Rookie of the Year. He's a 5-time All-Star, 5-time first-team All-NBA. Luka's the real deal, and he's going to be one of the top 10 players of all time when his career is all said and done. So, you got a scoring machine in Luka. You got a scoring machine in Kyrie Irving, who can dish out and assist on any given play and has probably the best ball handling skills out of any point guard in the history of the NBA. And then they're going up against Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and the Celtics. When it comes to Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I'm not denying their talent. They're great players. They really are. But when it comes to the recent success of the Boston Celtics, they do not necessarily show up when it counts. We saw it in the finals against the Warriors 2 or 3 years ago. We saw it against the Warriors, and we see it in the playoffs. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, can they finally overcome the hump? Can they finally win big games? Can they finally show up when it matters most? Because a lot of times, they've just shrunk. And that's the reality of the Boston Celtics over the better part of 13 years. Since the 2008 title run, it's been choke after choke for Boston. And I'm probably jinxing them, but I don't think Boston can win this series against the Mavericks. I think the Mavericks have been tested more in the playoffs than Boston. Boston had an easy road. Mavericks, not necessarily the easiest road. And I just don't think they were tested enough in the playoffs. I think this is easily their toughest challenge. And of course, it comes at the worst time to build them up, and that's the NBA Finals. So personally, I think the Mavericks are going to beat the Celtics. I'll go in 6 games, maybe 7. But right now, I do think that the Mavericks will beat the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals, capturing their franchise's second career NBA championship. Jeez, I don't know why that's really escaping me. I don't know why. But I think the Mavericks win their second championship for Dallas and beating the Celtics in 6 games. I don't think the Boston Celtics are ready for anything that the Mavericks can throw their way. All right, so we're going to transition. So, recent news, it was speculation for years whether or not college football would make a return on the consoles. Whether EA or NCAA, with all the lawsuits that happened in the NIL, it was unsure whether or not that an NCAA football game would be made again. Which a couple months ago I talked about that it was actually happening. And then we got the trailer for the game, which it looks fantastic. It really does. And it's only going to be on next-gen consoles, which, sorry for those who don't own the newest Xbox or the newest PlayStation. I feel bad for you guys. But then a couple of days ago, we ended up getting the full gameplay release trailer. And I'm going to play a snippet a little bit, and I'm going to talk about it slightly because, this is going to be the first NCAA football game in 11 years, and I've ranted about this before. Electronic Arts, EA, as a company has always been scummy, at least of recently. Money, 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 money. That's all their bottom line was. And I get it. It's a business. I get it. But when it comes to game development and game design and gameplay on all their sports games that EA releases, and even their non-sports games, it's all about microtransactions. It's all about money. They don't care about the quality of game that they put out. They don't care that it basically you have to buy all sorts of unnecessary crap in-game with real-world money. They lock all the good content behind a paywall. I've always had my issues with Electronic Arts. EA has always... This is why I haven't played Madden in close to 4 years. Now, I have a newer Madden, but that was only because it was a gift. That's the only reason I play it, is because it was a gift. But since then, I haven't touched that game in damn near 2 years. I basically boycotted EA when it comes to the games that they put out nowadays, especially their sports games. But the new NCAA football game coming out, this is built from the ground up. It's a completely different game. It's a completely different feel. And looking at the gameplay and everything that's going on in this game and all the content it has, it's going to be a great game. So I'm going to play a little bit of the snippet of the gameplay trailer for you guys. So I'll talk about it after. But here's the clip I'm going to show you.
Wear and Tear is a progressive player health system that prioritizes strategic substitutions and diverse play calling to keep your players healthy. With Wear and Tear, every hit matters, but not all hits have the same impact. And a single hit, like a blow to a quarterback's throwing arm, can change everything, just like it can in real life.
So a Wear and Tear system, when it comes to big hits in games, I'm very interested in this because they're making it so much like real life college football. I think this is going to be the best sports game released in probably close to 10 years. And this includes all the 2K games, MLB, the show games, all of it. I think it's absolutely crazy with some of the stuff that they're doing in this. Now, they're also adding some real life music that is played at college football stadiums. Enter Sandman for Virginia Tech is not in it, unfortunately. I'm so mad about that. I really wish that they had one of the most iconic entrances in college football when it comes to Enter Sandman and Virginia Tech. but they will have the song Mo Bamba in it. If you watch the clip from Penn State and Michigan from years ago, you can hear, and it was Michigan going to Penn State in a whiteout game. You can hear the entire crowd singing Mo Bamba. It's just a crazy atmospheric thing that they're putting into this game. The attention to detail is really what I appreciate EA doing. I really think that this game has the potential to be probably the greatest college football game ever, especially with the NIL and players actually being in the game. It felt weird watching the trailer and actually seeing guys like Donovan Edwards from Michigan, Travis Hunter from Colorado, and Quinn Ewers from Texas. It was weird seeing their names on the back of their jerseys. You know, nobody ever has been used to that. Not one person who's played college football has ever been used to seeing that in a gameplay trailer, no less. So it's kind of cool seeing a wear and tear system because, you know, if you get hit wrong in football, I know this from experience, you know, it affects you differently. It's not just, it ain't a video game, but they're bringing the real life into the real world into the video game world. So I'm really looking forward to EA College Football 25. It releases on July 19th. Don't know if I'm going to call off work. If I don't work, well, you guys know what I'll be doing that entire day. So I'm really looking forward to this game releasing in a couple months. I think it's going to be probably the greatest college football game. It has the potential to be the greatest college football game of all time. So I'm going to do something a little bit different. Well, not something a little bit different, but I'm going to go over two more things today. A little bit of a shorter episode, but I'm going to make some predictions real quick. This is our way too early predictions. Way too early. So I'm going to talk about the NFL conferences and divisions. I'm going to pick every division winner I'm going to pick every team I think is going to win their division this year in the NFL. So we're going to start in the AFC East. Oh, this is a tough one. But I'm going to take the Miami Dolphins. Now, I know Buffalo. I know they still have Josh Allen. I know they still have a good, solid defense. Solid, not great. But they lost a lot of talent in free agency this year. And the Bills no longer have Stephon Diggs. They did draft Keon Coleman from Florida State, who I thought was a fantastic wide receiver and should have been drafted in the first round. But when it comes to an overall team, there's only so much your quarterback can do for you. There's only so much your quarterback can propel you to in the NFL. Now, unless you're Patrick Mahomes, which Josh Allen is not, he's still fantastic in his own right. But I don't think that the Buffalo Bills are going to win the AFC East this year. I'm going to take the Miami Dolphins with Tua, Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle, that entire offense. I think the Dolphins are primed and ready to overtake the Buffalo Bills in the AFC East. And then New York Jets and New England Patriots, you can round off, third and fourth place. I don't necessarily care about those two teams. I think they're both going to be crap. But let's move on to the AFC North. And I'm going to be a little bit biased. Just kidding. I think the Baltimore Ravens will win the division. I do think it's going to be extremely close when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Bengals. But I think it's entirely plausible that the entire AFC North can make the playoffs this year. But you got a new guy under center for Pittsburgh, Russell Wilson. Not what he was before, but definitely serviceable and definitely better than what we've had. And he's not the worst quarterback in the division. I give that tip of the cap to Deshaun Watson. Everybody knows how I feel about Watson. Even a lot of my friends who are Browns fans understand how much of a head case Deshaun Watson is. And they understand that he's not entirely that great. So, that's neither here nor there. But I personally think Baltimore Ravens with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, a revamped offense, great offensive line, solid defense. I think the Ravens win the division, but I would not be shocked one bit if the Steelers ended up propelling themselves to the first place in the AFC North. I wouldn't be surprised. Now, Pittsburgh has the hardest schedule in the entire NFL. But I do think it's possible that the Pittsburgh Steelers can propel themselves into first place in the AFC North. AFC South, Houston Texans shocked everyone last year. They're going to win. They're going to win the South again, and probably by a landslide. You got the Tennessee Titans. Will Levis at quarterback. That's not going to do it for you. The worst offensive line in football. No more Derrick Henry. I think Tennessee's in a rebuilding phase now. I think they'll finish last easily. Then Jacksonville will finish third, and then the Colts will finish second. The Colts with Anthony Richardson, they're going to be fine. I think the Colts are going to be fine, especially over the next couple years. They're going to contend for the AFC South eventually, but I think Houston is just too high-powered for anybody in the AFC South to stop. C.J. Stroud is already making his case for one of the best quarterbacks in the entire league. So I'll take the Houston Texans to win the South this year, and not necessarily close. AFC West, Kansas City Chiefs, enough said. They're going to win the division, but here's what I'll say. I will not be shocked one bit if Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert for the Chargers contest with the Chiefs for first place. It would not shock me one bit. I do think the Chargers bounced back from last year with a 5-12 record. They were garbage, and a lot of that was because of Staley at quarterback. Staley at head coach. Everybody knows my feelings towards Brandon Staley. He had no business being a head coach. He's a defensive head coach, and yet his defense progressively got worse each year that he was there as head coach. So, in comes Jim Harbaugh, offensive guru and a quarterback whisperer. You already have Justin Herbert there, who's easily probably one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the league, or underappreciated, I should say. He's still one hell of an athlete. He's still a fantastic quarterback. I think he's a top 10 quarterback in the league when it comes to talent. He just needs to win more. But I think that comes with a new head coach, with new play design, new scheming, everything. Completely new. And I think that Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh, maybe they won't win it this year, but they will contest for the Chiefs to win the AFC West. But I will still take Kansas City Chiefs, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, the entire organization. I'll still take the Chiefs to win the West. Slightly and barely, but I'll take the Kansas City Chiefs to win the AFC West. All right, let's move on to the NFC. Philadelphia Eagles are revamped and ready to go. I have my reservations on Jalen Hurts still. Ever since Shane Steichen left for the Colts, that offense has never been the same. Jalen Hurts has not been the same. I need to see again if Jalen Hurts can perform without Shane Steichen's play calling. But I do think that the roster itself is just built better than anybody else's in the NFC East by a landslide, and I think they overtake for first place over the Dallas Cowboys, who I do think finished second, but not necessarily a close second. Everybody knows my opinion on the Cowboys. Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons, those three behemoths that you have to pay when it comes to their contracts. It's a slippery slope if you're Jerry Jones. It really is. Trust me, they'll still finish second. They'll still probably make the playoffs because the Giants are hot garbage, and the Commanders, they made some moves. They may finish third, but it wouldn't put it past them to finish fourth. But it would not shock me if the Dallas Cowboys severely regressed this upcoming season. It would not shock me one bit if the Dallas Cowboys fall from first to last in the NFC East, because each and every other team made significant strides to better their teams this past year. Obviously, Jaden Daniels from LSU, the Heisman Trophy winner, is going to Washington. They also got Austin Eckler. Washington, they're an interesting team. They may be the best, 5 or 6 win team in the league. I feel like a lot of their games will be close this year, but I think they'll end up finishing third behind Dallas, but in front of New York. New York is hot garbage. The Giants, especially without Saquon Barkley now, they are hot garbage, and they're not going to be competing for anything, at least for the foreseeable future. So I think the Philadelphia Eagles overtake the Dallas Cowboys to win the NFC East. NFC North. Detroit Lions, but it's not going to be by much. I will take Detroit to still win it because their roster is absolutely loaded, but Green Bay will completely challenge the Lions for first place in the NFC North. They'll make the playoffs again, and then round it out with Chicago and Minnesota. This division is going to be a dogfight. It really is. Chicago, I feel like, will finish third, and then the Vikings fourth. I don't know. Like, I do think Detroit and Green Bay, they're both competing for first and second. This may be, let's say the Chicago Bears and Minnesota Vikings, let's say they both go 7-10 again. Those are going to be the best 7-10 teams in the entire NFL. They'll be the best third and fourth place teams in their division in the entire NFL. This entire division is loaded with talent. Minnesota Vikings, obviously, they have a great offense. They're adding J.J. McCarthy, who I thought he landed in the perfect spot to be successful in the league. And then you got the Chicago Bears, adding Caleb Williams in the draft, Rome Odunze in the draft, a solid defense. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if any of these, I think Detroit has first locked. I really do. But Green Bay, Minnesota, Chicago, honestly, you could flip-flop any of them. I think they're all going to win a bunch of games. So it's kind of hard to tell. Like I said, it's very early on, but you know, Chicago's not quite there yet. Minnesota, they're not going to quite be there yet. So I'll take Detroit to finish first, but the Packers not far off. NFC South, the dumpster fire division of the NFL. I think Tampa Bay with Baker Mayfield in that team, I think they take first place. The Saints are going to go from second to last in the NFC South because they are hot garbage. The Atlanta Falcons, they'll go second. They'll compete with the Buccaneers for first, but I think Tampa Bay is too well run. I think Tampa Bay's roster is much better than Atlanta's. Carolina, they're still in a rebuild. They're still hot garbage, so they're not going to be competing for anything anytime soon. Poor Bryce Young has barely anybody to throw the ball to, so you know, we'll see. We'll see how he ends up doing. I think he's set up completely for failure. I don't think he's going to succeed in Carolina whatsoever, but Tampa Bay first, and then I'll put Atlanta behind them slightly. And then finally in the NFC West, you got San Francisco, Los Angeles Rams, Seattle Seahawks, and the Arizona Cardinals. I think the Rams overtake the 49ers for the NFC West. Cooper Kupp's healthy. Matthew Stafford's healthy. A young offensive line, but a young, good offensive line. Young talent like Puka Nacua. They addressed a lot of needs in the NFL draft for their defense, especially getting Cameron Kitchens in the third. I think it was the third round at the 99th overall pick. He'll start at safety for them. You know, the Rams have a lot of young talent on this team. And for the 49ers, what's Brock Purdy going to do this year? Again, I need to see more from Brock Purdy. I really do. I don't necessarily see special in him. I think he just has such a fantastic, loaded roster around him that he's able to overcome a lot of things. But it'd be like, let's say the 49ers make it to the Super Bowl again this upcoming year. I compare this situation like, now not necessarily to the same degree, but I compare it sort of like a situation to the 2005 Chicago Bears. They made the Super Bowl against the Indianapolis Colts and Peyton Manning. They made the Super Bowl in spite of their quarterback play, Rex Grossman. Who would have figured that Chicago's last quarterback to take them to a Super Bowl would be Rex Grossman? But I can see this being a similar scenario because the 49ers are just stacked all the way around. The 49ers have an absolutely loaded roster. But Brock Purdy necessarily isn't that special. He basically doesn't lose the game for San Francisco. When it comes to anybody, Rex Grossman for Chicago years ago lost games for the Bears. Brock Purdy, I think, will have a similar fate. He's given the keys to a Porsche and just told not to crash it. That's the reality of Brock Purdy right now. So I'll take the best quarterback in the division, Matthew Stafford, to overtake the San Francisco 49ers for the NFC West. And now, one more thing before we go out. So we all know that we're moving into a 12-team playoff next year in college, this upcoming year in college football. So I'm going to give you my take on who I think is going to make it. Now, this is a rough estimate on who I think can make the playoff. I'm just doing who can make the playoff. I'm not going into any of the details into the semifinals or into the college football playoff national championship game. I'm just naming 12 teams that I think will make it, not necessarily in any order, but I definitely think that these 12 teams will at least make the playoff. One is Georgia, been the poster child of the SEC for a couple of years now. Alabama, as much as I love Nick Saban, and as much as it sucks to see him leave, I still think that they'll be in good hands, especially getting Washington's head coach. It's Bama. They're never bad. I think Alabama will make the playoff. Ohio State, I talked about it last week, that I think this is Ryan Day's last time, and I think it's his last chance. And I think he's coaching for his job and his life right now. So I think Ohio State makes the playoffs. I'll take another team that can make the playoff, Penn State. I think Penn State's always viable in the Big Ten. I think they'll be fine. LSU, I believe they'll have a chance to make it. Tennessee and Ole Miss, I think they have a big chance to make it. As much as people would love to say Michigan, I don't see that happening. So I'm taking Michigan out. So I think Clemson can make it. The University of Miami can make it. Florida State can make it. And then I'm going to take one more out-of-pocket team. Probably Oregon. Oregon's still going to be viable. So we're going to see how that unfolds this upcoming year. But the 12-team playoff ushering in a new era of college football, I think it's going to be a fantastic ride. And that's going to wrap it up this week on The Lake Show, everyone. Be sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, leave some comments down below. Again, I really appreciate all of your patience. I really appreciate you making me a part of your day. And we're growing something special here on YouTube. And I'm thankful for God for all of you in my life who have been nothing but supportive and loving for the channel, for me, for my family, everything. And I'm really appreciative of all of you guys. And thank you. And I appreciate your constant and continuous support. I'm your host, Dominic Lako. God bless.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's time to break up so I can make a better